passionate about Cleveland sports.
He's going in! Touchdown!
Browns, Indians, Cavs, the Big Ten, and more.
Cleveland is a city of champions once again!
Andy and Jarid, Cleveland and beyond.
A swing and a drive! To deep right!
Here are your hosts, Andy Billman and Jarid Watson.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Andy and Jarid, Cleveland and Beyond. He's Andy Billman. I'm Jarid Watson, and this episode is going to be dedicated to the Cleveland Browns review, Part 2.
Cleveland Browns.
The Cleveland Browns season review. We did Part 1, it feels like 2 weeks ago now at this point, and we squeezed in another episode because of that crazy ESPN article that came out. Seth did a wonderful job explaining and connecting all the dots over the past, how many years? 12 now, since the Haslams have owned the Cleveland Browns. It wasn't as damning as some might assume that it would be, because at the very end, you can see all the hope that the Cleveland Browns find themselves with at this point heading into 2019. So if you haven't gotten a chance, go ahead and check that episode out. And also, don't forget, Part 1 of our Cleveland Browns review was the prior episode to that one. So here we are today, Episode 2, Cleveland Browns review. But first, this.
Hey everyone, this is Adam Weinstein, the founder and CEO of Thrive Fantasy. For everybody who doesn't know, we're a new daily fantasy sports platform for prop bets. So definitely would love for you guys to check it out. We actually have a $10,000 guaranteed prize pool for NFL Super Bowl on Sunday. So we definitely have a lot of value and opportunity for you to make some money. Check out our deposit bonuses and matches via Celtics Pulse, and we'd love to see you on our app.
So that's it. Thrive. Check it out. Head to our Twitter page at CLE and Beyond, and click the link and sign up. It's that easy.
What I like about it is I've become less and less of a fantasy guy over the years. I still like fantasy, but I don't have the time to be doing 24 hours setting lineups and figuring out injuries. I just don't. Having a full-time job doing this, having kids, you just don't have that time. What I like about prop bet is it really tests your knowledge of what's going on in game. I think it's fun. You and I are going to do a great thing with it over the Super Bowl weekend, do some prop bets to kind of get ourselves immersed to it. But it's a great new website. We're excited to be a part of it, and we're happy that they are part of our sponsorship for the Pulse Podcast Network.
Don't forget, click the link on our Twitter page. Andy, the Cleveland Browns at this point, we left off with that tie, the first game of the season against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And we talked about this offline about how these 3 episodes, it's going to feel a lot like Star Wars. It's going to feel like, the first episode was A New Hope.
Yep.
This episode is going to feel a little more like Empire Strikes Back. And then we'll have Return of the Jedi for episode 3 of this Cleveland Browns season review.
Well, right. And again, like, this really is like, the only thing that stinks about episode 3 is we don't win the last game. Other than that, everything from Return of the Jedi plays out perfectly. But this episode and the first episode, I really felt like really did play like what those films did, and that you had a new hope going in. You knew that the Empire wasn't dead because we obviously saw Darth Vader go off into his little ship. And here, you're really feeling the wrath of, what was going on in this team and making adjustments. And there were some positives going on. But Jarid, if we're really being realistic, from a team that came off of winning 1 game from 2 years, to expect it to be a clean run in 2018 was being a little bit naive.
Well, there were still things that were lingering that we knew were going to. We had some itches left to scratch that were left over.
That's a good way of putting it. And by the way, we're going to get to the obvious, some of them. We're obviously going to see the birth of this episode of Baker Mayfield. It's funny. It kind of goes consecutively. Baker, and then the next game is Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb had a wonderful game against the Raiders. And then throughout, you really see Denzel Ward playing a big part. But really, on the other side of this is sadly Hugh Jackson. The Hugh Jackson era did not go well. We all know that. That's going to play a big part of this podcast. But we're going to start off with probably a guy who's been here longer than anybody when he started the year. It felt like he had been here forever at times, is Josh Gordon. And after the first game, he did score the game-tying touchdown. There seemed to be some hope about Josh Gordon coming into this year. When you have a guy, Jarid, and that kind of athlete score a game-winning touchdown, you have good vibes. I remember thinking that's a good moment for him. It's a good way to start. He didn't have a training camp. And then out of nowhere, which seems to be the Browns' MO in the last year, out of nowhere, news struck. And on Saturday, I think it was Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, it came out very quickly that Josh Gordon was not going to be playing in the game. And then at first it was listed he had a hamstring injury,
Right.
and then later on it came out that he had been sent home. And when you read something like that, you know there's more to the story.
Right. There were the rumors that were coming out, Andy, that sounded like some people got angry about those rumors that it had to do with him falling off the wagon. Other people recognize that it's, and I've said this ad nauseum, Andy, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. Josh Gordon has not had a shortage of showing us who he is. And unfortunately, there were two faces to him. One was an amazing, talented, possible future Hall of Fame wide receiver. And then the other face was full of demons, and he could not escape them. And that's what we were left with after all those years of trying to the organization trying to help him through.
Right. I would like to say this too. Gordon is still battling some things. So to be fair, this guy's really going through a lot of life changes.
Yeah.
And when most of us go through life changes, we are allowed to do it by stepping away from work or stepping away from any kind of spotlight. And our spotlights are very minor compared to Josh's. Josh, though, does not have that luxury. And that is part of the NFL, good and bad. And so Josh is definitely battling some things, as he currently still is, because he's not in the Super Bowl this week. But Josh later came out on Saturday on the 15th. It came out through Dorsey that they were going to release him. And then really what kind of sped up over the weekend was rumors. And Rappaport reported that it looks like Josh Gordon injured his hamstring in a promotional photo shoot. There were some other rumors I read on the internet. People can decipher what is what. And then what happened after the Saints game on Monday finally came to a head where the Patriots made a trade. They gave the 5th-round pick, and then in exchange to get Josh Gordon. It's a sad way how it ended with Josh. It's not going well for him right now as he's currently on the suspended list again. I am one of those guys who has a lot of sympathy for Josh. I really hope he fixes himself. I feel very bad.
And he's
for Josh.
still such a young kid, Andy. He is. And it's easy. It's easy for fans to just to throw shade, to yell, to complain, to say that he did nothing but waste the Browns' time. Look, you've got arguments there, but at the same time, unless you walk in someone else's shoes, you just don't know. And each of us end up with our own struggles, no matter what they are, at some point in our life. And for that fact, I'm not going to beat him up either. I never have been able to. It's disappointing. I want to give him a hug, and I want to slap him on the back of the head. What are you going to do?
Agreed. And the thing is, it just didn't work out. We tried several times, and that's the other half.
And if Belichick couldn't make it work, no one can.
I know. And honestly, it went through 3 regimes. It went through the Tom Heckert regime.
Yep.
It went through the new regime. Actually, you could say it went through multiple regimes. So Josh has had so many opportunities and through so many regimes to get it fixed. It's too bad from a business standpoint. I thought the Browns made the right move from a business standpoint in making the trade. By the way, it proved to be so. And, again, I just look at it as a sad miss.
Yeah.
I love again, we look back on things. The Browns did the right move, Jared, by making a supplemental draft pick for Josh Gordon. That was the right move at the time. That's the one thing Heckert did. I thought he hit out of the park. The draft pick was properly used, and it was a proper risk. It just didn't work out. As it comes to this season, I'll be honest with you, to wrap it up on this show for this podcast with Gordon really had a little blip in the year. He didn't really participate in Hard Knocks. He only had 1 or 2 preseason moments in practice, it felt like. All he really did in that first game was catch a touchdown, and Jared, that was it. I really don't remember him doing, honestly, anything else. And maybe he did in the game. I don't remember him really being a part of this year. It's hard in a sad way, Jared, is part of the story here, too. Josh didn't really have much of an impact on his team, to be honest with you, which is surprising for such a talent, but he really didn't on the field.
No, the only impact that was ever made, I think, were 90% distractions. We had the moment where he wasn't supposed to start, and of course, Hugh, as clueless as he was with what's going on with his other coaches and what's going on in the field, you've got Josh Gordon out there for the first play of the game. These things were the norm in that, with that team, and Josh Gordon amplified and put on a spotlight. I think a lot of the. He's a good example of a lot of the bigger problems that were going on within the organization.
He was. And so that's how the game started the night before. I definitely think it had part of the storyline there as it should. Honestly, when it comes to the game of Brown Saints, I don't know if Josh Gordon made an impact. I don't think he really felt his loss. So let's get into the game. Game 2 was Brown Saints in New Orleans. Second home game for the Saints. The Browns come in with one tie. This was again kind of the course here for the Browns. Strange game. They really were up for most of the game, 12-3, and then kind of this is a game where you don't ever want to have a scapegoat. I hate that. I don't like when people have scapegoats. But Jared, it's really hard to say anything else about this game other than it's a Zane Gonzalez game. It's really the game where he really came to light as a guy who I think cost us momentum, cost us opportunities. He missed an extra point earlier in this game. And then when the Browns were marching down in the early fourth quarter, Gonzalez missed a key 44-yard field goal to put them up 15-3. And you could feel on that miss, you could feel the game change. And the Saints went right down the field and scored. And you could tell from that point, Jared, it was really going to be a tough game for the Browns to pull off and hold back the Saints. Taylor ends up 2 drives later throwing a terrible pick. The Saints again had a short field. They go right down the field and score. Give the Browns credit. They came back. Taylor on a 4th and 5. Boy, one of the plays of the year for Taylor. 4th and 5. There's a 47-yard bomb to Callaway. Ties the game, but again, Zane Gonzalez with a missed extra point. So it's 2 missed extra points and a 2 big missed field goal. Of course, the Saints come down the field. They kick the game-winning field goals, it looks like. The Browns and Taylor do a nice job of getting them in place. This time, Zane misses a 52-yarder. That's more understandable. Even in a dome, you like to see him make it, but 52 yards is a long way. A lot of things that you take out of this game, it just shows you Taylor, this is the one game Taylor really played well. He actually outplayed Breeze if you look at the numbers.
Right.
The quarterback rating will tell you differently, but I truthfully thought, except for that one pick, really Taylor had a great day. When you look back at the game, Kamara didn't kill us as much as I thought on the ground, but he was really torturous through the air. This was the game for the birth of Callaway. Callaway really had a strong day, had that big touchdown reception. Nick Chubb gets a couple carries. Again, no Baker Mayfield. But again, Jared, you hate saying this about a team. I really don't even remember Hugh doing, and you read through the box score and you read through the storylines, Hugh Jackson and the coaching staff really didn't do much wrong here. They got the team ready in position to win the game. And Jared, Zane Gonzalez, you cannot miss field goals like that. And you certainly can't miss extra points, especially when you were going to take the lead on that play. And Jared, you hate saying it, but that's really summed up the Browns special teams throughout this podcast.
It took the words right out of my mouth. It's the theme.
Yeah, and again, you hate having a scapegoat. I hate that. I will say this is one of the few times you could feel it. I think a lot of this can go on Zane Gonzalez. That's unfair, but I don't know what else you can say about this game.
And to think that you had a chance to take a game, to steal a game against what ended up being a playoff team,
a Final Four,
on the road in their house,
couldn't do it.
Missed opportunity.
Couldn't do it. So this was a bad stinging loss. I think there's another loss we're going to talk about a lot here too, but this is one of them. Mm-hmm. This was a very bad stinging loss. What I remember about the short turnaround week, Jared, is this is one of the and there's several more to come. Hugh Jackson's job's on the line in this next game. Fans were starting to tilt. I was starting to tilt. Like, we cannot lose the Jet game. That was my mindset all week. It's like, oh my God, can you imagine if we don't beat the Jets?
Well, you couldn't. You just, first of all, you couldn't imagine that they would. But at the same time, as a Browns fan, saying that you can't imagine that they would absolutely means that there's a possibility that they would. And you know that. You know that. You know it's prime time. You know that the stakes are high. You know there's nothing more that Browns fans want than for those coolers to pop open when the clocks hit zero. Andy, I was as close to being certain that they would win that game as I have been about any game this season. And thank God I was right, because I probably would have lost my damn mind had they not. And it came out, the game started, and it was a mess. Well, it was boring. It was crazy. It was on both sides of the ball. The offenses couldn't do anything. Am I correct on that one?
A lot of punts exchanged, and really, again, a special teams blunder, a block punt by the Jets, finally allowed the door opened. And Crowell, I mean, this game, before we get down the road to this game, I was not as confident. I thought we were going to win. I did not think it was a guarantee. But I said we should win. It became like I know we'll win at the beginning of the year.
Right.
So I'm like, I think the Browns are going to win, but I'm not sure. So
well,
anyways,
and then during the game, it got even tougher, and you were just hoping they could come back.
Right. So the block punt happens. It changed the whole. You could feel the energy changing that game. Yeah. Isaiah Crowell scores 5 plays later, and this is where the tilting really hit an all-time high for me. A 3-and-out. Then Crowell scores again, and he wipes his butt using his toilet paper with the ball, which obviously is not a good look. But okay, in that moment, you're like, here we go. Is rock bottom again. Crowell, the guy we just lost the year before, is running all over us. He's now rubbing it in our face, literally, with a football. And we have showed no sign. Tyrod Taylor played terrible in the first half. Yeah. For how well he played in the Saints game is how poorly he played in that first half.
You could sense, you could sense that fans wanted Baker to come in that game.
Yes.
And if I remember correctly, maybe I should watch it again. They started chanting Baker towards the end of that second half, if I'm not mistaken.
Buck had one of his better games that night. He kept saying, well, wouldn't you put Baker in the game at this point? He kept questioning it throughout the game, even before the game got to 14 up.
I remember telling Priscilla, though, saying, I'm sticking to my guns. Keep the kid on the sideline. Right. Keep the kid on the sideline. Well, of course, we'll get to how I reacted later.
Well, right, of course. We were all, by the way, again, it was a tidal wave. And it's what you're supposed to do on paper. So 14 down, the Browns do move the ball, but it was a weird drive. Some penalties kind of kept the Browns around in that drive. And then the last play of the drive was a 3rd down. Taylor gets hit. He was concussed on that hit. Yeah. It's a hard hit. You could tell right away that it wasn't one of those.
You almost, by the way that Taylor was playing, you could almost there. I hate to say this, but it felt like there was a little relief. And I don't mean that in a way where he was hurt, but you almost felt like it was coming. You know, you sensed that something was coming.
Yep. So that gives the door to Baker. The Jets do go 3-and-out. Give the Browns defense credit. That could have been one of those plays where the Jets had any sort of semblance of a drive to take a 17-0 lead even at half. I think would have been a big blow for this team, but they held them down. Baker comes in. He drives the ball down the field. And then at one point around midfield, I believe, he gets sacked and stripped. And Botonio, thank God, recovers the fumble. Really, these little plays are things you forget, but that was a big play because it allowed Baker to move the ball a little bit closer. The Browns do get a field goal. You can feel not a sigh of relief, but okay. It's not as bad. We saw some good things at the end of the half. But, people want to remember Baker, and Baker was great. But that Botonio recovery, and we're going to get to another couple plays, that was a big play in that game, Jared. If he doesn't recover that ball and the Jets get the ball midfield, and again, they score quickly on a field goal, oh, my gosh, this whole game changes a lot. So give Botonio, who was a Pro Bowler, a lot of credit. Big recovery. Baker did what he needed to do. But to your point, now to the bigger point, look, we all knew at halftime, time to bake. It is time for the bakery to open, and it's time for Baker Mayfield to show what he's got, because when it got to halftime, there was none of us, I don't want to hear it, who was thinking, boy, I hope Tyrod Taylor comes back in. If you're so, you're lying.
I wasn't hoping he would, but I thought that he might.
Okay, well, Jared, yeah, we all love Jared. He had a brain fart. I had brain farts too all the time. I just had one during the Purdue game. So it happens. Look, the bigger thing here is Baker comes back. You could feel the game. You feel the momentum. Beginning of the third quarter, still the same. And then a big play in this game. The Jets go 3-and-out. The Browns get a couple first downs. Nothing really a big thing. Nothing really happens. And then the Jets get the ball back inside their own 20. Uh-huh. And then I think the play of the game and why he's such a big catalyst in this first half of the year, Denzel Ward gets a strip fumble and recovery. And Jared, it is one of the bigger plays that gets forgotten. but that sets up the field goals. They don't even move the ball an inch.
I
They end up
haven't
going
forgotten
down.
a damn bit of that play because
No, you
I
haven't. I
will
know
never
that.
forget. It's ingrained in my mind how that wasn't just a knock the ball out of that he. This is what we've talked about, Andy. This is what we want Denzel Ward to do more
Right.
of. He ripped that ball out of his arms. He was going for the ball the entire time. He was not going to let go until that ball came out.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it changed momentum. It was a great one-on-one play, literally a one-on-one play, meaning Denzel did not have any help. He
Mm-hmm.
wasn't assisted. He stripped the ball out. Again, the Browns don't even move the ball. They end up kicking a field goal from inside the 20, 14-6, and again, momentum going back towards the Browns. You can feel it. It's getting closer and closer here. And then, again, the Jets go quickly 3 and out.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there on out, Jared, you can kind of feel the game kind of going what we all remember. They're starting to move the ball a little bit, and then a big play of the game to Landry and a great pass by Baker. But Landry makes an amazing catch at the 1 yard line. Really tees up the Browns on one. Hyde scores a touchdown. And then the play that I think should be on posters, that I think should be
it is, isn't it? The celebration of it is. I'm almost positive.
And whoever took that photo,
It's one of the best photos of the season.
It is a great photo. The 2-point conversion catch on the Philly play by the Browns. Mayfield scores, tie game. And from then on out, for Jared, I would have to assume by now, you are now all in. And you're not wondering about
the entire time my wife was saying, I told you so. I told you they should start him. I told you he should have been playing from the beginning. And I'm like, stop it, honey. I know. I never said that I didn't say that he wouldn't be good. I said I don't want him getting hurt. I don't know if he's ready. That's all I ever said.
I agree. And by the way, I was the same way as Jared. I thought Taylor was the right guy to start. I do. And actually, I do think that was the right thing. I don't know if it's necessarily true. You can predict what Baker would have done. And I think Taylor starting the year was the right thing to do. So we get back to the game. The Jets actually come back. For people forget, they score a field goal, a big play on this. Again, big plays that maybe people forget. Kindred makes a huge tackle inside right inside the 20. I want to say it was around the 12 or 11 yard line. Makes a huge tackle, keeps the Jets not from scoring a field goal, but keeps them off of the downs and keeps them out of the end zone. The Jets end up kicking a field goal, take the lead. Baker goes, and this is when Baker, from here on out, the rest of the season, had his magic touch. He goes right down the field, leads the team back. Hyde gets stopped a couple times in the 1. He finally scores. Touchdown for the first time. The Browns are in control. You can feel the momentum in the stadium. And then we all remember what happens from there. Terrence Mitchell makes a great pick. Not a great pick. I mean, the ball's not a good throw, but he makes the interception. Cooler's open. Bud Light gets the all-time marketing ad of the century. I mean, you can never tee that up any better. Everybody's in hysteria. And for the first time since 2016, that you can say the Cleveland Browns have won a game in the regular season. They beat the Jets 21-17. It was a great night. It was a relief night. It was a night of many great things. But at the end of the day, yeah, he didn't have the best moments at times. He got a fumble. He had some moments, but this is the game and the birth of Baker Mayfield. And he led the team in the key spots to get big plays. It's hard not to get excited about him. The other guy, too, who I've been posting, I want to plug again, Denzel Ward's strip was the biggest play of the game. It might have been one of the biggest plays of the year that got him some of those wins because he gave momentum back in that game.
It was the moment where you realized that Denzel Ward going as early as he was in the first was the right call by John Dorsey. There was no mistake made.
We're going to make a point of this probably throughout. Once he realizes he doesn't have to make the hard hits, he has got such a ball hawking ability.
Yes.
He is a special, special player. The momentum of that whole, because people forget again, it was a Thursday night.
Well,
it really carried, and it's one of the few times, Jared, a win carried nation and maybe globally. The Browns winning really had national headlines. It really was a big deal. People should never make light of that win. That was a huge, it's just one game and it broke a losing, blah, blah, blah. But it really, really gave a lot of good, positive vibes. And everybody felt good about the Browns on that Friday morning. Everybody.
Right. Well, let's do a little Lee Corso here. Not so fast because we had to prep for another game.
Well, again, was keep the positivity. And like a typical thing, you have to go out. Going now, they go to the Raiders game on September 30th. For as long as I've lived, whenever the Browns play in Oakland, and I think they've won once or twice, I can remember. All those games go painfully weird. It's not Denver, but Oakland's got a weird vibe. I don't remember a great victory in Oakland, I guess is my point. I'm sure the Browns have had one, but boy, it doesn't seem like they ever get a win out of there. It's just one of those spots. And the Browns always seem to play. And I remember one time we played them at home and we were against Derek Carr. Other than that, I always remember the Browns going to Oakland.
Yeah, always. As a kid, that's all I remember too. And I remember, I can't say that I remember it any differently, Andy. There are certain Raiders games that stick out to me that you expect the Browns to do well, and then it turns into not what you were expecting.
So the Browns come in 1-1-1, and they play the Raiders. And the Raiders this time had not won a game. Raiders have really looked broken as they did most of the year. And in a typical West Coast game with an East Coast team, the Browns, I wouldn't say they were sluggish, but this was if you had to say what was their sloppiest game, Jared, I would say the Raiders game was their sloppiest game. They were just all over the place. It's one of the few times all year you couldn't point out anything that happened positively on defense.
The defense could. It was like Marshawn Lynch was running through a wet paper bag. There was nothing that could stop him. Nothing. Yep. Nothing. And keep in mind, coming into that game, the Raiders and their fan base and what they had watched that team do with moves on the field and what looks to be a rebuild. They're in full rebuild mode for the future. Is at least the trending what I think Raiders fans were expecting. And then his team comes out and offensively it drives up the score against the Browns. It was ridiculous. I never expected them, although I will say the Browns have a history of allowing good running backs to have their best days ever. And that's what this felt like. Yeah,
the Browns, it was a weird game because the Browns played so sloppy, Jared. It's really, really hard to remember too many clean plays. They made big plays. The one big positive about this game, and you saw a lot from Mayfield in this game. This wasn't one of these games, too, Jared, you circles a rookie game, right? Where you saw the great Baker. He had some turnovers. Right. He had a fumble in this game. He was kind of all over the place. The big positive that came out of this game, the birth of, I think, Denzel Ward and Baker, Denzel's kind of first three games. Baker had happened against the Jets. This was the game of Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb had 3 carries for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns.
3 carries, Andy. That's all he was given.
That's all he was given. So Nick Chubb, I will never forget the run where they were trying to run out the clock and he ran for a touchdown to put him up by 8. And it's like here. So the Browns in this game, 28-14. Raiders come back, 42-34. Jared alluded to it. Lynch just owned the Browns. Don't even go back and watch it. For people go, are you really sure? He had 130 on the ground, only on 20 carries, which means he averaged 6.5 yards a rush. That is high. And then if you think, it's just a running game. No, Carr threw for 400 yards. So and the Browns had 10 penalties in this game. And so the Browns just really had a sloppy day all the way around. Now to one of the many times this year. The Browns still had the lead, 42-34. Yep. The Browns are on third and short. And Carlos Hyde, it's one of the Jared, I remember watching it. I remember saying, game is over. We got the first down. Here we go. Like a minute. I think it was like 2 minutes left to go in the game, something like that. Hyde clearly stretches. I never even stretched over. I watched the replays. He stretches the ball over for the first down. And then one of the more bizarre sequences you'll ever see. Go watch it back on YouTube. They say he wasn't marked down properly. They moved the ball back. And Dean Blandino, who was doing that game for Fox, had a look of holy blank. I don't even know how to respond to this because I thought that was a ridiculous replay challenge to begin with. And now they're actually moving the ball back. You could tell in his face, I got nothing. I got nothing.
Yeah.
I don't have any response. So A terrible call happens.
This was the theme, Andy. The theme throughout the year was every time that you wanted to blame the refs, you also had to look at the Browns and go, why did you even let it get to this point? And I think that happened 3 or 4 times this season, where the NFL would have to reach back and apologize every time because they were blatantly wrong. But again, it still goes to, why are you even in this position?
Absolutely. And you know me by now, and people who've heard this podcast before, you can't blame the refs. You're in this position. You got a chance to stop them. The Browns certainly did not. The Raiders moved after that play call happened. The Browns really took a mental check out. They really never did anything else in this game. The Raiders drove right down the field. They scored. Of course, they get the 2-point conversion. In overtime, the Browns did nothing. The Raiders had a chance to win with a field goal. They missed. The Browns again did nothing. The Raiders drove the ball down the field and got the winning field goal. Look, very, very sloppy game from the Browns. Terrible loss. It really kind of sums up the frustration after that game. I still feel today. This is their worst loss of the year. And it's 4 games in, and you're 1-2-1, and you've already gone through heartache in 2 of the games. I'd say 3 of the games, because even though there's a tie, I'd say 3. And Jared, you saw some hope with Baker, Denzel Ward, Nick Chubb, but you and I harped on this after this game too, but during it, penalties and turnovers. The Browns had the drops. 4 games in, you really felt all this. And then this is the game, I think it really carried even in the Ravens game, the Hugh Jackson cloud.
1 step forward, 2 steps back.
Yeah. The Hugh Jackson cloud after the Raiders game really developed. I remember watching after the game, you just looked and you go, well, this is certainly not a scapegoat, and Jackson certainly didn't make all those penalties and everything else. But boy, it feels like we got out-coached here.
Right, because you're looking at all this. What you're seeing is flashes of lightning out of a handful of guys that are on that field that can make game-changing plays at any moment. But it's as disorganized and uncohesive as it could have ever been in that game between the penalties and the defense, which, again, we know how much we loved what Greg Williams did with this team throughout the end of the season, but we cannot forget that his defense did not look good throughout the season. Beyond the forced turnovers, this was, again, we knew that something was going to have to give. At some point, it just wasn't that. The yet just wasn't there. It just wasn't yet. We had to wait it out.
Here's the thing about Greg Williams. He had some moments as we get into part 3. But this game, to what Jared alluding to, is you're absolutely correct. This game was an embarrassment. There's not one thing you can circle. It's the one game all year, Jared.
Yeah.
You can look on defense and you're like, I don't know if anybody really played well, for being truthful. It's hard. The Charger game's another one which we'll get to. But the Raider game, if you're finding a positive on defense, I think you're really stretching. And again, what's so shameful, you get all this momentum of the Jet game. You have all these penalties. You play sloppy. And yet, if you want to, a weird replay challenge kind of changes everything, and the Browns end up losing the game. It was such a strange
This
game.
was also the first game where I kept noticing, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there was a lot of this was the game of Myles Garrett going one way and Marshawn Lynch going the other. It was like a lot of over pursuit. Marshawn knows, it's coming. He finds the hole. Linebackers are nowhere to be seen.
It just was
Marshawn
bad.
Eats up the, I'd have to look back at this stat. I wonder how many yards after contact Marshawn was getting with that 6.5. I'm willing to bet he was probably getting almost 6 yards before contact on average.
There was one or two plays. I just remember where, to your point, Jared, he was running from grass into the dirt. And that used to be such a big thing in the 80s. But I always remember in my head, when you ever saw a guy run from grass into the dirt, it's not good. when you're on defense. And that's what you saw a lot in this game. Be running in grass and running in dirt. It's like, well, he had to at least go a good 7 yards.
Mhm.
I mean, probably more. So, it's just, I just remember that game, and I just remember saying, boy, what could have been. And that, that's a woe is me thing, but there's a lot of woe is me moments in part two. And that's definitely another one of them. The Saint game's one thing. Maybe the Saints come back and win. Hard to really find a way of why the Browns did not win the Raider game.
There's way too many points to be given up to that Raiders offense.
Really was. So we move on to the Ravens. The Ravens, which is the last win in this section. Again, another strange game. What a surprise on the Hugh Jackson era. Total punt fest in the first half. The Ravens only scored a field goal early. And then the Ravens looked like they were driving the field. Really, Baker had a hard time in the first half in this game. And then, again, Denzel Ward makes a big play on the 2-yard line, keeps the Ravens off the board with an interception. Jared, again, it's one of those moments of Denzel Ward where if the Ravens score, I don't know if the Browns really get back in this game. And you hate saying that early in the game, but it had that feel. It gave the Browns a chance to get a breath. And then at the end of the half, Baker Mayfield leads the team down to a touchdown. And then like every other thing this year in special teams, a missed extra point by Greg Joseph.
Yep.
What else is new? And then the Ravens, who are the Ravens, they hustled. They scrambled back with Flacco. Flacco's the quarterback in this game. They get in field goal range again. And then guess who? Denzel Ward blocks a field goal to get in the half 6-3. Jared, I've said this many times, and, there's a lot of different things we'll get to, but Denzel Ward won this game. I want to say this again. Denzel Ward.
Well, if you
won the game
go back and listen to the podcast, I'm pretty sure you said the same exact thing.
Denzel Ward won this game. Won this game single-handedly. Those two plays changed the whole momentum of the game. Schobert had a wonderful day in this game, too. He played all over the field. He combines for another fumble in this game along with Jamie Collins. Basically, the Browns, again, they get better on offense in the second half, but they really don't go anywhere. Joseph gets a field goal. The Ravens get 2 more field goals. Joseph, again, has a 55-yarder, but Greg Joseph's not making that. So that goes awry. And then in overtime, really a lot of 3 and outs, maybe a couple of first downs. And then finally on the final drive, Baker gets the team going. You could really feel the team really getting into position. And then here it is, a 37-yard field goal. I watched it back and replayed it on the last couple of days, Jared. It is the ugliest game-winning field goal you'll ever see. It literally is, people go, oh, it's not a knuckleball. Yes, it was. That was the definition in what you saw. That was a knuckleball. Knuckleball.
It was.
Went in.
It was in typical Browns fashion. What I remember about this game is Baker Mayfield threw like 25 for 40-something, had nearly 350 yards passing, and the Browns had 1 touchdown. 1 touchdown. Carlos Hyde didn't rush anywhere near what he should have. I believe Duke had a decent day, but didn't have any touches. And weird, again, Nick Chubb coming off of what was 3 carries, 100+ yards. You turn around and you're still only giving the kid 1 or 2 carries.
Jared, it's insane. I'll tell you the other thing that's insane in this game. When you really look back at the numbers and you really look back at what happened, when you go back and you see the one thing that the Browns did in this game is they got first downs, but they couldn't move the ball consistently. Why? You're going with players like Carlos Hyde, which I like Hyde, but he's a backup running back compared to Nick Chubb. Chubb should have been starting, and it's absolutely something we saw here.
And it goes right back to Andy. It goes right back to those underlying storylines that were going on behind the scenes when you're talking about Todd Haley and Hugh Jackson, and you got John Dorsey who has to babysit it all.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you a big note I had here: a lot of drop passes. The Browns had a lot of drop passes in this game. That played a big factor. Baker did throw over 342. Again, you get a win, but the bigger thing here is to get us into these next few games. At the time, we didn't realize the Higgins injury happens in this game. As we learn later on, Higgins is not a difference maker, but Higgins does give you depth and gives you another weapon on offense. Yeah. That's not a threat, but it's a weapon. And he really came into his own this year. that injury ended up really setting up some things down the road. And this game was a win, but again, it's the weirdest reaction on the sideline. Baker wasn't excited. I remember there was a moment with him and Hugh, and he just looked despondent, even in a win. And Jared, that really kind of sets up these next games because, again, they beat the Ravens, and it was a great win. I was so excited. But looking back on it, it's a forgettable win, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it was. We're lucky to have pulled that win off early in the season against the Ravens. That's what it comes down to. The bummer about Higgins that stands out to me throughout the rest of the season is you notice that at that point, when you take Higgins off the field, you're going to lose everything that Landry brings for you. And that showed. That hurt us. And a lot of people wanted to know, where's Landry? Why is he disappearing? Look, it's easy to cover the guy and double. You don't got to worry about any other threats on the field. You don't have to, when you don't have a Higgins out there to worry about, what are you going to do?
No, I agree. I think people sometimes get too hard on these guys. So what happens on Saturday ends up being a big signing, but really kind of came and went was Brashard Perryman. So he gets signed on Saturday, October 13th, my dad's birthday. But he gets signed on that day. And then really the beginning of the end here as we became to know. The LA Charger game was a big blowout. This is the blowout game. Really never competitive. Drop passes, penalties, you name it. Referee, we complained about the referees in this game a lot. But as we both noted in the podcast, it didn't matter what was going on in referees. The Browns and it happens in every year and every NFL team, so the Browns aren't unique here. The Browns really just got pushed around and blown out. Jared, there was never a moment in this game where it felt like the Browns were in this game.
Well, and
we just got blown out.
We just talked about, hitting the Ravens at the right time in the season to get that really obnoxiously dumb win that we got with a dumb kick that somehow went through the uprights.
Game-winning field goal you'll ever see.
And then you turn around and talk about meeting the team at the wrong time. The Chargers were, in full stride for their season. And of course, you go back and watch the Ravens Chargers playoff game, and you're wondering how the Chargers even got there to begin with. But that's almost, it's neither here nor there. But it's a bummer that that we met the Chargers at the wrong time and ended up paying for it.
We did, and Baker Mayfield. This is kind of the bad string of games for Baker. He didn't play terrible. But Baker gets hurt in this game. The offensive line is becoming more of an issue in this game. You really start seeing the issues on the line really start to pop up. And the other big thing in this game that's been talked about a lot, the run defense was terrible. Gordon had a career day. Really ran. In fact, they really took Gordon off the gas pedal. I think Gordon could have had an historical day if they wanted to in this game. And again, drop passes, penalties. This became a theme in these next three games.
I mean, that was the thing. They had nearly 300 yards on the ground, and then you turn around, Phillip Rivers only needed to throw 20 passes. What's that tell you? What's that even tell you? And they scored 38 points with Phillip Rivers only throwing the ball 20 times.
It was the only time outside of the last game of the year with the Ravens where a team realized, if we run against and the Texans. The Texans-Chargers in the second Ravens game, if you run against the Browns, you'll win. The Browns had no answers to stop the run. And they just didn't.
And they had no run game at that point either. Again, we're talking about Nick Chubb got 2 carries that game. We're talking about Duke Johnson had more yards carrying off 2 carries than Carlos Hyde had in 14.
Yeah. Again, Mayfield had a rookie-type game. Had a couple throws, but really he was rushed. He really had a hard time in this game getting protection.
Yep.
Bad interception. Again, it happens every NFL team, so the Browns aren't unique. This was their game. They just played terrible. And when you play terrible against a good team, Jared, what's going to happen? You're going to get blown out.
Yep.
And that's what happened here. So that loss you kind of feel carrying. And then I think you start seeing the beginning of the end of Hugh. And it started on Friday, October 19th, where Carlos Hyde, I did not like this trade. I still don't like this trade, but I know why he did it. So I think you need depth in the backfield, but I get it. Nick Chubb becomes the man. Carlos Hyde gets traded away. Really came out of nowhere. I remember you and I were talking about it on a Friday afternoon. Again, the Browns this year did a great job of having news come out of nowhere. it's just hitting you in the face. And this
Well,
is
I remember the moment it happened. I was sitting in the parking lot of a grocery store as you were screaming things that we won't say on the podcast in my ear on the phone as soon as it happened.
it wasn't nice. 'Cause I was really fired up about this trade.
Andy, I thought to myself, look, here's the deal. I just, what I realized was it wasn't about Carlos Hyde. This again goes back to those underlying, those other storylines that are going on behind the scenes, where the babysitting clearly comes out in full effect, and John Dorsey says, "Enough. Nick Chubb will run the ball. Nick Chubb will run the ball."
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, I guess he felt like, hey, I have to trade the starter to get this to happen. The other thing that happened, which you and I talked about before the Carlos Hyde trade, this week was the first week where Hugh was really contradicting himself in press conferences badly.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of like injuries being hidden. It felt like really having a hard time deciphering what was going on.
Yeah.
Also in the Charger game was the game where Schobert got hurt. So there's a lot of discussion about where Schobert falling in all this stuff. So a lot of things happen here that just really, it made the whole week leading into that Friday morning before the Carlos Hyde trade was not going well for Hugh. I thought, now looking back at it, I think everything you said is right. And this was the beginning of the end. The Hyde trade said, look, we're going to run Nick Chubb. By the way, they were all right. Nick Chubb was the right call in this case. And again, it really just started the beginning of the end. The Bucks and Browns, I thought the first half in that game really carried over from what we saw the week before. Really 3 straight halves in a row, Jared. It was a complete blank show. It was crap. It was crap from the start. The first half was crap. Even the Browns had a 2-0 lead in this game off safety. They really didn't play well. They just looked lackluster. They were really just, I call it a moving emotion. They were just moving with no real sense of purpose.
Right.
It was the one game all year that really Jameis Winston did what he wanted to against the team in the first half. The second half, the Browns by the way, turnovers in this game really saved them by the defense. The Browns did much better in the second half. I don't know what was said at halftime, but they played much better on offense. Again, the Browns played better. Mayfield played better, wasn't great, but again, did enough things to get him in position. They
took care of the ball.
Yes,
they took care of the ball. He had two touchdown passes, and they made a late push to tie the game and take it into overtime. But what we're talking here about, Andy, is the fact that this is another game that this should have never been this way, just like the Raiders game.
No, it should not have been.
This is a game that they should have won.
The Browns got away with something known as game, Jared. The Buccaneers missed a field goal late. Could have put them ahead to win.
Right.
The Browns got some breaks. I'm telling you, the Browns got a lot of breaks in this Bucs game, and they just did not want to take advantage of it. In fact, once the missed field goal happened, it felt like the Browns were going to win the game. In fact, they got field possession early in overtime, where they were going to get the ball around midfield. But again, like everything else this year, the Browns hold the Bucs deep in their own end. They're going to get the ball around midfield, and I mean, something you would see out of high school. Pepper's ball bounces right off his chest.
Yeah.
Recovery by the Bucs. The Bucs don't even move the ball. I think they moved the ball maybe 4 or 5 yards. And then the kid who just missed a game-winning field goal earlier nails it from 50-plus yards. Browns lose again. Devastating loss. Same old story. Drop passes, penalties, stalling drives. Again, Baker was all over the place. Desmond, the offensive lineman, looked terrible in this game. I mean, Baker's running for his life at times because of the bad offensive line play. And again, a short pass syndrome because they can't protect. This is the game, Jared. We saw it in the Charger game. Here we go again. We've seen this before. I went off on this game about, like, are we going to start throwing the ball on 3rd and 7 and completing it for 3 yards? Are we going to start doing this crap again?
Yes, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of that.
This is one of those games where it's like 3rd and 10, we're going to go 7. We're happy with that. And you saw a lot of that in this game because he couldn't really do much. Baker really persevered in this game. I agree with Jared. He made a nice couple throws in this game to get him close, to get him tied. Again, the Browns are
and Andy, let's not forget too. We're talking about the week coming off of Carlos Hyde being traded. We're talking about the entire year where Nick Chubb's only getting 3 carries, per game. What happens? I will say that this is another game where at least it's another the right move was made 18 carries, 80 yards, averaging 4.5 on the ground. Nick Chubb still had a decent game. The Browns were able to run the ball. And it furthers the fact that this should have been going on from the very beginning of the season.
Yes. And this was, too, where the wheels came off of Hugh. By this point...
Oh, yeah.
Hugh had a very bad press conference the week before. After this game, he decides to go off. You know what? I'm going to start taking over the calling duties. You and I both call it. You could just feel it's kind of dead man walking. You just kind of feel it after this game. Really, Hugh had 2 weeks of just bad press, and this continued on through the Bucs game. He really came off as being, you kind of you had it perfectly a lot of times when we were doing these podcasts back in the fall. Just uneasy, shaky, hard to read about what
doesn't take responsibility for anything. He never he has an excuse for everything. A kind of a shrug your shoulders. Got to go look at the tape. I wish we would have done this. I thought this. Blaming others. The bus driver really loved to drive the bus over people on a regular basis.
He did, and the thing is, it's a reflection of your team when you have penalties and drop passes, and your team really just looks. And again, you got to wonder too how much this offensive line play had to deal with this too, because once he left, the offensive line really shored itself up. I don't think that's one of those things that's ironic. And again, when you come after a game, what's the first thing you talk about? Well, I want to start taking over the play calling duties. You're lost. I mean that's not the way to react after a loss like that.
You aren't allowed to take over the play calling duties, Hugh. That's why you were forced to hire an offensive coordinator, which, by the way, was clearly a bad move on your part when you were warned that you weren't going to get along with the guy.
Absolutely. So, then we get to the game on the 28th, and leading up to this game, I had told Jared I really thought at the end of this week Hugh Jackson was going to get fired after the Steelers game.
Well, we knew this was the graveyard, right? This is the graveyard for Browns coaches.
It's a graveyard of Browns coaches. I thought he was going to lose his job before the game. This is the only game this year, Jared. There's a couple other times. This is the Falcon game. Is another game you and I had a good vibe on. This game played everything we thought it would. The Steelers didn't come out and try because they knew they had the game in hand before the game ever kicked off. The Browns had a nice start early, but that's because the Steelers were the Steelers did not even try in the first quarter. Didn't even try. Decided they weren't going to put any effort in the game. And, of course, Greg Joseph, who did kick 2 early field goals, had a chance to put him up 9. But Greg Joseph, he can't make it.
Yeah, you never felt safe being up 6 in that first quarter. You still knew that this game was not going to go in the Browns' favor and that the Steelers were not even going to come close to allowing it to look like that first game of the year.
Yeah, Jared, this was one of those games. And, by the way, Desmond Harrison was terrible in this game. Terrible. You wonder how much longer Desmond Harrison was going to have that job. Yep. Because he was.
Well, you knew it was an experiment
awful.
From the beginning of the season. You were hoping he was going to improve over the season, and it never happened. And you can tell just by looking at Baker's numbers with 180 yards passing, the kid had to get rid of the ball on a constant basis. He threw a pick in the game. Andy, that offensive line. We will say this though. I think when that switch out came out, it was night and day.
Yes.
I don't think, and we'll talk about this further over the next in the next episode. It was how many quarters until somebody actually was able to get to Baker Mayfield after that game? It was a night and day.
Night and day. The Steelers ended up coming and they just blew the doors off. The Browns was 33-18. Here's some things that hit in this game. This is before the Monday firing. As you left there Sunday, really everything now is on full blast. Haley hates Hugh. Hugh hates Haley. It's all on the press and headlines. It's all announced. Okay. This was the first game you and I talked about, and I really felt it. Baker's growth is now stunted. It's now been stalled. He didn't play well. It's a difference between being a rookie. You kind of saw the things you saw from Kaiser in the past, kind of the same things you saw in the past from even a guy like Cody Kessler. You hate to ever compare that, but it's true in this game. He just looked terrible. He looked off. We talked about Desmond Harrison, I'm sorry. And then, so you got all that crap going on. And this is where you just know the wheels are going off. Connors ran over the Browns again. What a shock. Wide receiver, tight ends, running backs. Everybody stinks. Everybody stinks. No one had a good game again. And then when you get towards the end of the press conference, and even Myles Garrett's not happy with the defensive scheme, seems to be some disagreement. Folks, the buzzer of pain and panic has hit. When you're now getting complaints from every different direction and they did. Myles Garrett, I don't know what the hell's going on in defense. Baker, I stink. L team stinks. Haley, Hugh hates Haley. Haley hates you. We're going to hell. Everything's in hell. We can't win. Another Steelers defeat. We get to grind that goddamn bus 77 fucking miles up. Blah, blah, blah. We got to go up north and got to do that whole damn thing again. And here we go. It's like, great, another great loss.
Wasn't it a relief, though, Andy? We knew that was it.
Right.
I was relieved.
But then,
thank God. It's finally going to be done.
Yeah, get done. But then a wonderful, crazy day happened. Everything I thought happened on Monday the 29th. He was gone around noon that day. It gets officially announced on 2:30. Hour later, Todd Haley, which was the surprise, bunk, he's gone. So now you got Haley and Hugh gone, which, by the way, we commented. I still think that's the right move at the time. It comes out that Greg Williams is going to be the head coach, as we later learn this new guy who we kind of heard about, maybe thought about him from Hard Knocks, but not really. Freddie Kitchens, who we all know later. You know, Jared, they went through such an exhausting 2 weeks after the Charger loss to get to this point that 15-day run of crap.
They went through a full season's worth of emotions at that time.
Even the win against the Ravens sucked. Everything sucked. It's like one of those moments you go, even that win, it's okay. So, like, everything is just going to hell in a handbasket. And again, you got those bleeping Steelers, and you hate losing. I hate losing to them more than anything in the world.
Oh, man.
Like, the Ratbirds are close, but the Steelers are close too. I will never have a yellow towel in my house, ever. So, like, all those things kind of pile up. Everything but to people, and I spoke at length about this crap that you can't fire a coach in midseason's bull. The Browns did the right thing. They cleaned house. Even at the time, I felt it was the right move. But Jared, by Monday night, if we're being fair, we knew Greg Williams was head coach. But every Browns fan is exhausted. Exhausted. 8 games in. We're 2-5-1. We see some hope. But boy, did we get drugged through a gravel pit to get to 2-5-1.
I didn't know what to expect for the rest of the season, Andy. I had no idea. I was afraid offensively at that point because when you thought about Baker being stunted on his growth, and then you get rid of his offensive coordinator, not realizing, Andy, because a lot of people thought Todd was going to take over as the interim. A lot of people thought that was the way it was going to go. When we look back on this whole thing and look at even now what Seth added to this conversation now to look back and review this moment in Browns history through his ESPN article, you got Hugh Jackson telling the owner and the general manager to get the F out of his office. He needed to be carried out by security at that point, in my opinion, because what moron says that when it's no longer your office? Secondly, you got a quarterback who you think is going to be put in a position where he already was struggling. You thought his growth was being stunted. Now you got some guy that just steps up and takes over as the offensive coordinator that you didn't realize was going to work out. You had no idea at the time. You thought Todd Haley was going to actually be the guy to take over the interim spot. He was actually telling that he would vouch for Kitchens to get it, which makes me wonder, what was anyone thinking about Greg Williams and how did he end up sliding in to begin with? The entire thing is mind-boggling. You don't know what's going to happen next with this team. All I could do, though, is to not worry about those things, was live in the moment. Like, we learned this, right? We learned that living in the moment is so much better than sweating the past and worrying about the future, right? This is a time where I thought, I'm going to live in the moment that Hugh is gone, and thank God.
Well, yeah, look, Hugh had to go. All you said is true. I won't repeat it. The Seth article, point on everything we need to know. But if we're living in the moment, 2-5-1, probably should have been 3-4-1, 4-3-1. Okay, we're not. It's 2-5-1. And what's on next? The Kansas City Chiefs, who are red hot at that point of the season. So the Chiefs come into town. You got this whole crapola thing going on. You didn't know behind the scenes, but we do now what was going on behind. With Haley doesn't want to be the coach. By the way, not only it sounds like too before the game that some people in the Browns, including Haslam, told Jackson they were going to fire Haley. So there's all sorts of disgruntledness going on. But Jared, on Monday the 29th was the part 2 of the day of John Dorsey being this Obi-Wan Kenobi, where he's like, I am cleaning. It's enough of this crap. It's enough. You know what? Goodbye, Hugh. You know what? Goodbye to Haley. We're getting rid of all the drama. Out. I can't fire Greg Williams yet. I bet. By the way, I think he would have if he could have, because it sounds like Garrett was pissed off if you look back at it.
Right.
What's going on with Greg? What's going on with Greg? But he can't do that. He's got to keep some semblance of calm. But Dorsey cleaned out again. It's like the Empire Strikes Back at the end when Luke loses his hand. I mean, here we go again. But yet, everybody's still standing. There's some things that had to be done that got done finally. Hugh should have never been on board at the beginning of the year. Let's not even live that. We all know that it was obvious. It was obvious in September. It's obvious here in January. But Jared, you saw some things too. Denzel Ward, Nick Chubb in the Raider game, what Baker did in the Jets game. You knew there were things going on that were good. And you could tell when you were watching this team that there were some things here. And as we get into part 3, that was the run that we needed. Because when you really look at this 7-game stretch we just did, a lot of pain and frustration and everything. And again, even the Jets game aside, even that Ravens win, it was a great win. But you look back at it, it was we won, kind of. Just survived. But look what's coming up. And that's what's great about this. It's a movie Hollywood script. Everything's out of control. Everything's spinning in. And he got played. It's like that Necessary. Does everyone remember the film?
I do. It was a Keanu movie, wasn't it?
Yeah. And then who do you got coming up? The Texas Colts, and they're undefeated. Who do the Browns get? The Kansas City Chiefs, the hottest team in the league, coming into town. Jared, it was great.
We'll get into that one in part 3, obviously, to start. And I will just end this portion by saying Andy and I knew we had zero expectations for that Chiefs game. Zero. And in a weird loss, we were pleasantly surprised, I think.
Yeah, in that game, I don't want to give too much away for part 3, but that really made up for everything we just lived through, aside from the Jets game. The Jets game was great. But I guess the things to take away, we saw all these positives. Hugh had to go. Haley had to go, as we all know. Everybody thought everybody's going to get fired. Everybody did get fired. And the other things that stand out, the offensive line at this point was a mess. Desmond Harrison was not working out. You really didn't have some sort of continuity on offense. The defense was leading the team, but yet the defense wasn't good enough to do that. And Jared, it all leads up to part 3. And as we all know, some things started to come together and it became a lot more fun in Cleveland and Brea, Ohio, which is good, which is what we needed. Do you have a yellow towel in your house? I will never have a yellow towel in my house, by the way.
No.
Never.
Let me explain something to you, Andy. Andy, there's never going to be a purple towel in my house. There's never going to be a pinstripe towel in my house. There's never going to be a yellow towel. There's never going to be what is that? The maize and blue. There's none of that in my house. There's not, there's never going to be those things in my home. There's no, disgusting. No.
So when we get to part 3, we'll do the last 8 games of the year, and then we'll also get off to all the changes going on. Just to do one admission here that I want to get into part 1. I forgot to mention the trade with Landry. Landry was a big trade that happened in the offseason. He did a lot of good for this team, and he played really well in the Bucs game in this run. He also played well in the Raider game. He had a big catch in the Jets game. I just want to make one quick point, and I'll be wrapped up. Landry, I saw this guy on ESPN make a listing of all the trades that happened in the offseason, and he gave the Landry trade a C, and I thought that was very unfair. And I'll say this. I don't want to say the guy's names. I disagree with him very often, and people can find his name and go and look. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but boy, he and I don't agree on anything. So I thought that was a very harsh grade. Landry was more like a B plus A minus because he really stabilized the wide receivers as a talent.
He did.
He really gave him consistency, and that was a big trade. And I think people should remember, there's the one omission I wish I would have talked about in part one. He really played a big role this year. Okay? And he didn't, look, he's not a speedy guy like Odell, but gosh, looking through back in these games, big catch against the Jets. Huge moment in the Ravens game to end in part 3. Jared, he had a lot of great things this year, and I just think people should remember.
Andy, he was the first guy to come in here and get some money and actually put some heart and leadership on the field for this team.
Yes. Yeah, I know where you're going with this. So I wanted to make that point, too. That was a big deal that happened. So as we come back, Jared, we'll do part 3, starting with the Chiefs week. But again, as you get to this point, getting in the Browns' mindset, we're exhausted. The Steeler game was terrible. It ended as we thought it would, with Hugh Jackson getting fired. Haley goes. Greg Williams comes in, and we start the Chiefs week when we come back, and we'll do the last 8 games for part 3 here at the end of the season in review.
All right, let's see if I can rattle all this off. Make sure you check us out on andyandjared.net. Nope, I've already screwed it up. andyandjared.com or clevelandandbeyond.net. That's the website. You can listen to the podcast there. Also, you can subscribe on iTunes. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cleveland and Beyond. You can also follow us on Twitter at CLE and Beyond. Make sure if you go to our Twitter page, you give us a follow. Check out our bio portion. We're going to have a link to Thrive. You want to check out Thrive, do some of them prop bets. A great way to take advantage of some of the fun ways to bet on some of these games, including the upcoming Super Bowl, of course. So check that out. The link will be there. It's something Andy and I are going to mess with and make our own bets before we do our Super Bowl preview episode. We're going to do some of those prop bets, and we're going to come on and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Take advantage of that. Also, don't forget, we are a part of the Pulse Podcast Network. Thank you to them for having us be a part of their network and be the official Browns podcast for their network. I'm going to say that that's the safe way to explain our position on the Pulse Podcast Network. You can shoot us an email at andyandjared@gmail.com. Leave us comments. Tell us your predictions for the Super Bowl, whatever it is, your hopes and dreams for the Cleveland Browns, the Cleveland Indians, the Cavaliers, or just your favorite sports teams. And maybe we'll read it on air or talk about it next time when we come on and do this thing. Andy, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's basically it. So we'll do part 3. You can hear that next for people coming up. And then we're going to do a separate Super Bowl preview. But what we're really going to do is do everything but preview the Super Bowls. That's everybody what they've been doing this week. So we'll kind of go through the prop bets. Give who we want to win in this game, or who we think will win this game, which is probably 2 different answers, or maybe the same answer. We'll see. So we'll do all that next. So part 3's next, Super Bowl preview next, and then we'll go from there. So that's part 2. Better times ahead in part 3.
He's Andy Billman. I'm Jared Watson. Thanks for listening once again to Andy and Jared, Cleveland and Beyond. Take care, everybody.